the 2026 NBA draft is just around the corner. And with that, it's only right that I bring you guys my big board for tomorrow's draft. And I explain to you why I think that the number one player in this class is Darren Peterson out of Kansas. Let's break it down. This is my big board on the RL Report with Ryan Luke. Now, I already talked about it a little bit earlier. Darren Peterson is my number one player in this NBA draft, and let's talk about why. And a lot of it has to do with just upside, pure ability. He just oozes potential when you take a look at the physical talent, the shooting ability, the form is just pure. And not only, is the form just so pretty, but the percentages back it up. And the athleticism backs it up. Yes, there are question marks when it comes to, I understand people may be concerned, the nickname DNP came out for did not play because he dealt with a lot of cramps. He dealt with illnesses. A lot of people are like, how much does he love the game? Is he actually committed to his team in Kansas? Or is he just kind of playing there to rise his stock, because he has to play in college before getting to the NBA? And while I think that those are valid concerns, I do think that, the talent is there. I don't think that he's necessarily a head case or someone with problems that I'd be worried about bringing into my locker room. I don't know if he's, the greatest leader completely in the world, but not every player, not every elite player is going to be a true leader. And some guys just like to lead by example by being a great player, and I think that's something you may see with Darren Peterson. But if we take a look, in particular about what he does, here I'm on Data Baller. You take a look, okay, 6'5", so great size for a guy who can play point guard or shooting guard, meaning he can be a combo guard, has a lot of potential, can play him anywhere. And that ability to play on ball or off ball, especially when you take a look at the teams that are drafting at the top. You look at Utah. They already have Keontae George. Do you need another guy who absolutely needs the ball in his hands? Not necessarily. Well, it's a good thing that Darren Peterson can play off ball. Same thing with the Wizards who picked number one, Trae Young. He's a guy who needs the ball in his hands probably to be the most effective version of himself, both as a scorer and a facilitator. Who's a great fit next to him? Darren Peterson, because he shoots the lights out. Not only that, yes, he's 6'5". Guess what? Nearly a 6'10" wingspan. The vert is 32 inches standing, 38 inches max vertical. I think that, you watch games, you see him on tape, he looks more explosive than that. And so I'm not worried about that. I know that's kind of mid-range, slightly above average when it comes to the vertical jump. I think he's even a better athlete than that. And we take a look at the advanced metrics. You can see it right here. Age-adjusted impact, 99th percentile on the offensive end. Defensive impact, 95th percentile for adjusted impact. This is why, to me, he's the best player in this draft, is because he is elite to above average on both sides of the floor. And that is just so valuable when you don't have to build your roster a certain way due to a deficiency of your cornerstone player. And yes, we just saw the Knicks with Jalen Brunson win an NBA title, and he's not the best defender. He's a willing defender, but he's not a great defender purely based off size and athleticism. So they had to get certain pieces around him. OG Anunoby, Mikal Bridges, Karl-Anthony Towns developed into a well above average defender during that playoff run. With Darren Peterson, not just only being able to hold his own, but being above average on the defensive end, if he reaches that offensive peak as well, you can build so much different kinds of rosters, so much flexibility around him. And so that is why he just holds so much value to me, is when he hits that ceiling, it's going to be, potentially the best guard, one of the 5 to 10 best players in the entire world. And I think that can't be understated, and that's why he is my number one player. I mean, you take a look at this. He got to the rim, little under 6 times per game, rim attempts, 60% from the rim. Not great, 29th percentile, given I think that can get better with time and with more development. You look at the mid-range, 95th percentile in terms of attempts. and 43%, 80th percentile. So he's very efficient from the mid-range. You get to the three-point line, 94th percentile in attempts, and he still shot 38% from three. That's an elite clip. Good free throw shooter. You look at the defensive end, nearly a 3% steal rate, over 2% block rate, great defender, great help defender. He just is the total package, and that's why he is my number one player on my big board. Now, if we take a look at my number two player on the big board, a little bit of a different story, Cam Boozer. And he is someone who really, you take a look at his game, he has no holes. He does absolutely everything well. And that's great. That's amazing. I think that he is no doubt bust proof when we take a look at players in this class, because at the end of the day, you know that he is going to be cerebral enough to be a good passer from the high post or even in the post. You can run him as a hub at the top of the key. He can handle the ball a little bit. Has showcased a three-point jumper. Good around the rim. Good rebounder. Good defender. Good leader. He does everything you want. Absolutely everything you could need if you're a GM. The only reason to me that he is not the best player in this class is simply because I think that the upside of Darren Peterson is just that much higher. And so I think there's extra value there. Given if you're a member of Spreadsheet FC, I can appreciate Spreadsheet FC. And you have Cameron Boozer number one, I completely get it. If you take a look at this guy's page, I mean, absolutely everything is considered elite. I mean, look at this. I know this is an NBA channel, but it reminds me of when you look at someone like Aaron Judge or Shohei Ohtani's baseball savant page, and you just see it fully red all the way, almost in the 100 or 90th percentile and everything. You take a look at Cam Boozer here, just absolutely everything is elite across the board for him. And so he's going to have no issues when it comes to translating to the league, and is why he's my number two player in this class. Now, if we take a look at the rest of this franchise cornerstone tier, I want to make an important, distinction here. These four guys, I think that a lot of us are kidding ourselves if we think that these aren't the top four guys in this draft. I know that it may be trendy to try to pick elsewhere or to try to be different. And yes, while you can have them ranked in different orders, and maybe you do like different players better, it's not definitive that these are going to be the best four players in the draft. I'm going to be transparent with you guys and say, I'm not going to try to come out here and just give you a hot take just to give you a hot take. I'm going to give you what I actually believe in, and that is that these are the top four players in this draft class, and that these are the four guys I would trust most in building my franchise around them. Now, we've talked about Darren Peterson. We talked about Cam Boozer. The third guy, Caleb Wilson, just an absolute athletic freak when it comes to pure ability, pure just oozing potential. I mean, he's 6'9.5" barefoot, over a 7-foot wingspan, pretty decent weight, elite athlete if you take a look at the 40-inch max vert. And he's just so mobile, great hand size, and he is everything you want in a modern-day wing outside of the jump shot. And that is where there is pause, because arguably, if you see Caleb Wilson out there hitting jump shots at the rate or just below a guy like AJ Dybansta or Darren Peterson, then hey, maybe Caleb Wilson is the best player in this class, because he is arguably one of the best defenders, if not the best defender in this class, and he shows you so much effort on that end, and he's great at getting to the rim, great in transition. He's one of those guys, we talked about it with a guy like Ben Simmons. We talked about it with a guy like Giannis, where it's like the three-point shot ever gets to becoming a major threat, a major part of his game. How do you stop him? Because he has everything else. And, I mean, if you take a look at this, we talked about it with Cam Boozer, where all the advanced metrics, if you're part of Spreadsheet FC, you're going to see everything loves him. Similar thing for Caleb Wilson. Really similar thing for all these guys towards the top of the draft. But for Caleb Wilson in particular, you notice on the offensive end, which, yes, he's a great offensive player now, but he's not an offensive tier, the same offensive tier as Cam Boozer, AJ Dybansta, or Darren Peterson right now, and yet his metrics are still all in the 80th percentile or better outside of spacing, and that's because that three-point shot is not there. But you take a look at defense, 96th percentile for age-adjusted, greater than 80th percentile in both steals, blocks, rebounding. He does everything well. I mean, you take a look at just purely the averages, nearly 10 rebounds a game at 6'9" barefoot. And it's not like he didn't have another big next to him. Not like he was playing center. He had Henry Visar there, a guy who 7 foot tall with larger than a 7 foot wingspan. So for him to be pulling down rebounds at that clip is so impressive. He showed promise as a passer, because you're imagining him playing at the 4, maybe the 3. In certain lineups, he can be your small ball 5. And so he showed potential as a passer, nearly 3 assists per game, and nearly a 20% assist percentage, which is pretty good. You take a look, I talked about the defense, 1.5 steals, 1.5 blocks per game. The true shooting percentage is great at 63%. You see the real true shooting percentage is even above, average. The 2-point percentage, 61%, great. 3-point percentage, though, 11th percentile, 26%. But I want to say, the form looks good. Before he got injured and hurt his hand, I think that if he's healthy, he and North Carolina go on a little bit of a run in NCAA tournament, depending on the path. And his 3-point shot was actually, and his mid-range shot were improving as the season went on before that injury. So I think that might have hindered him a little bit. 26%, again, not great, but he has so many other tools that he can produce and affect a game in so many other different ways while working and while hopefully bringing that 3-point percentage up. Again, as I said, 71% free throw shooter. That shows you that the shooting is there. That's not great. It's not bad. If a guy shoots 71% from the free throw line, you're going to assume he's better than a 25% shooter from 3. And, his rim attempts, he shoots 72% at the rim. That's great. He even shot great in the mid-range area, nearly 45%, which is 85th percentile. Got to the free throw line a ton, which is really what you like to see. You like to see a guy who has that floor as being able to draw contact, get to the free throw line, get easy buckets, easy points. And so that is why, he plays a major role for me as the number 3 player on my board. Closing out this franchise cornerstone tier, it's AJ Dybansta. I think the best way to put it is just an offensive weapon. I think that he averaged nearly 26 points per game. He doesn't really have a weak spot in his game offensively. Maybe you argue that the shot selection at times isn't always the best and that he settles a little too much on jumpers. He is, another guy who has a great frame, 6'9", 7-foot wingspan, almost identical size in terms to Caleb Wilson. Wilson about an inch taller. You take a look at the max vert, 42 inches, just an athletic freak as well. And the one concern I have with him, he's a guy from day one will give you 20 points per game in the NBA pretty comfortably, is what does he give you on the other end of the floor? All the other 3 guys in this franchise cornerstone tier are at least slightly above average on the defensive end, if not better than that. And AJ Dybansta is anything but that. He has the frame, he has the athleticism that tells you, hey, this guy should be a good defender, but he's not. So to me, that brings up questions, is the offensive load affecting it, the heavy load that he had to carry throughout the season for BYU, especially once Richie Saunders went down with the ACL tear, that he didn't have the energy, to kind of exert on the defensive end and be a really good defender despite having the athleticism and frame for it. Maybe he just doesn't care quite as much about it on the defensive end. And those other 3 guys in this franchise cornerstone tier, because of that ability that I talked about a little bit with Darren Peterson, because they're a great defender, it allows more flexibility in your roster, more versatility. Given I think AJ Dybansta can develop and actually be a better defender in the NBA than he was in college, purely because, he'll have more weapons around him. He'll be able to share the load, the offensive creation, the usage rate a little bit more in the NBA, so that'll help him. But another guy, you take a look at the offensive end. Impact, amazing. Creation, he creates his own shot. He's efficient. He has even shown a little bit of promise towards the end of the season, especially as a passer, being able to navigate when teams are throwing multiple bodies at him and still work to get his teammates efficient shots. The biggest issue is, that some people have on him on the offensive end is, like I said, the shot selection and also the 3-point shooting. He's a great 3-point shooter in terms of, the form looks good. He's a pretty darn elite mid-range shooter. He's good at the rim. And so you think, the 3-point percentage, yes, it's 33%, which isn't great, but you trust that it's going to be better than that. It's going to go up as he continues to work on that. But the 33% too was also on low volume. So it wasn't like he was a guy who, was shooting a ton of threes to the point where his volume drops a little bit because of the sheer amount of them he's taking. He didn't take a ton of them, and the percentage wasn't great. So you hope that that three-point shot continues to develop, and then maybe, you see more effort on the defensive end. In any of, the real key defensive stats like defensive box plus minus, steal percentage, block percentage, either one of the rebound percentage, he's not higher than 50% in either of those. And that was why, I kind of don't value him quite as high as I do some of these other players in this franchise cornerstone tier. Now, if we bring in the next tier, that's my immediate impact with upside. I'm going to go a little bit quicker here. Number 5, Yaxel Lendeborg. I just think that, yes, I understand he's nearly 24 years old. So he's had plenty of time to develop, get used to the competition he's playing, to dominate all facets just because of experience and also just the physical specimen he is. He's a guy, he can play anywhere between the 3 through the 5 in terms of position. Obviously, the NBA nowadays is positionless, so you consider him, he can play wing or big. 7'3" wingspan, ridiculous at his size. Super fast, laterally, good standing reach, good weight too. A lot of that has to do with being in college for a while. He knows how to bulk up. And he's another guy where he does pretty much everything well. And so he's another guy, not a totally amazing floor spacer, not a totally amazing shooter, but the impact is there in other areas. He shot 37% from 3, which is actually, very good for a mid-range, for a, small forward, power forward, maybe even a small ball center, with the way that he rebounds and with kind of the way that he played that at UAB prior to transferring to Michigan. The 3-point rate attempt, was pretty high, nearly 0.5, and he shot good 2-point percentage shooter, very efficient, good free throw percentage. And also on the defensive end, just a monster. Over 2% steal percentage, nearly a 4.5% block percentage. It doesn't really get better than that. As I said, an elite rebounder. Another guy that's just a jack of all trades. Reminds me of Cam Boozer. Obviously very different players, but in a way that they do everything well. There's not really holes in their game. The only difference is that Yaxel is nearly 24 and Cam Boozer's 19. So that's where that comes into it, is because Cam Boozer still has all that room to grow physically, mentally, sharpen his tools. Yaxel, while I don't believe, that some people say these guys who are 3 and 4 years in college, they don't really develop much more once they get to the NBA. I think that's wrong. I think that guys can still develop a ton when they get to the NBA, no matter their age. But I do think, obviously when you're 19 versus 24, there's more room to grow and change. And so the next player in this tier for me is Keaton Wagler. Another theme that is a freshman. We're seeing a lot of freshmen going high here. Yaxel Lendeborg really breaks up the party there. But Keaton Wagler is a guy, fun story, right in Kansas's backyard. Speaking of Darren Peterson earlier in this draft, but wasn't recruited by him. And so where did he go? Wasn't on any draft boards, went to Illinois and blows up as a star as a true freshman. He's got great positional value, can be a combo guard, point guard, shooting guard, 6'5". The wingspan, not much to be desired on a 6'5" frame. You maybe hope it's a little bit larger. The athleticism is something that a lot of people have discussed over the season. I don't think he's quite as bad of an athlete as a lot of people may make him out to be, especially when you consider, I think he's one of those guys that is just so technically sound with footwork. He knows how to overcome maybe some of the physical deficiencies when it comes to, speed, jumping ability, things like that. And also, when you talk shooting, he is a shooter. You take a look at this offensive numbers, just elite across the board. He shot nearly 40% from 3 on 11 3-point attempts per 100 possessions. So he shot a ton of threes, and he made a lot of threes. The efficiency was there. When he got to the rim quite a lot, actually, for a guy that a lot of people don't consider to be able to get downhill or use his athleticism. The issue is the rim finishing percentage wasn't great at 58%. You'd like to see that raise up. And for, again, a guy who a lot of people consider not a great defender or, athletically limited a little bit, he puts an effort on defense. And you saw that as the season went on, his defense got better. And, by these metrics, he was an above average, slightly defender. And so the positional size at 6'5" with a 6'6" wingspan, that ability allows you, that he's not going to probably get picked apart on defense, especially if he's showing already that willingness to put in the work on that side of the ball. You take a look at his shooting, numbers. He had 1.28 points per possession on perimeter shooting and 1.16 points per possession off the dribble. So he's a guy who's comfortable both catch and shoot and off the dribble. You take a look at the assisted rate. He created and almost all of his rim attempts, which is really nice to see when you saw he got to the rim at a pretty high rate, and his mid-range, and then his three-point percentage. Because of his ability to play combo guard, he can play off-ball and be a catch-and-shoot guy, but he also has the ability to create his own three-point shot. So there's just immense value there. I think he's another guy, such a high floor, is just going to, be conducive to winning. And I think that that's so important, and that's why I value that, especially at his age. Now, the next guy on my board, number 7 in this tier, Ade Mara, 7'3", 7'6" wingspan, has such great feel as a passer, and, elite rim protector, has shown, the potential to be a floor spacer as well. We're in the era of Wemby, and so if you can get a guy who's 7'3" with a 7'6" wingspan, is mobile, is not a net negative on defense at all. In fact, provides floor spacing, the ability, as I said earlier, to be a passing hub in addition to elite rim protection and help side defense, then I don't see why he shouldn't be, in this top 10 easily. And I understand that, he has a couple years under his belt, similar to Yaxel Lendeborg, and that he's a little bit older than a lot of the prospects we've looked at so far. But to me, that doesn't matter when the impact is there. I mean, you take a look at it, he had a 12% block rate. That's ridiculous. That's about as high as you'll see. His rebounding numbers, some might say, hey, why did he only average 7 rebounds per game at 7'3"? And I'd argue, well, he had to battle Yaxel Lendeborg, who's an excellent rebounder just in general, and especially for his position. And then also Merez Johnson Jr., who we're going to get to, who's also in this tier. Moving on down the line, I have my second best guard in this class, if you consider Darren Peterson to be a wing, and that is Mikel Brown Jr. And he is a guy who in Team USA, when they were playing in the U18 Cup, he looked like arguably the best player on that entire roster. He looked better than A.J. Dybansta, even though A.J. Dybansta got MVP. He dealt with a back injury throughout the season. A lot of people feel like that hindered his performance. But you take a look at it, 6'3.5" barefoot. It's going to be close to 6'5" in shoes, so good positional value. 6'8" wingspan, shows good potential there. Good defensive upside as well, even if he doesn't have to or hasn't been, the greatest defender so far. You don't feel like he's going to be completely picked upon. He can get, in the passing lanes a little bit, maybe a couple steals, just off the dribble. But you take a look at the offensive numbers. His metrics by far are the worst that we've seen, both offense and defense combined of any of these top prospects. And that largely, to me, hinges because of that back injury. And what sets him apart, though, is the three-point shooting. This is a guy who's an elite of the elite shooter. I know that he only shot at a 34.4% clip, but his three-point rate was in the 92nd percentile at nearly 0.6. And so in the system he played in wasn't the absolute best for him. And combine that with the injuries, the form is absolutely pure. So I think the three-point percentage creeps closer to 40% in the NBA with more spacing, more of a feel, especially if he's healthy. He showed promise as a passer as well. And so I just think that, he is a great fit for the modern NBA in his ability to pass the ball, shoot the ball at an elite level, get downhill when healthy, And so I think that he's going to easily translate, as that creator, as that initiator of the offense. Moving on to the rest of the top 10, Braden Burries. This guy, I just feel like he fits in anywhere. He's a do-it-all guy. We saw him at times at Arizona be the leading scorer in a game, and then we saw him be a role player next to Jaden Bradley and Toby Awaka and Koa Pete, who we'll talk about later on. And so he already kind of understands what it's like to play in the NBA in terms of playing your role, being a star in your role, and he does absolutely everything well. He's a great defender. When we take a look at, nearly a 3% steal percentage, great on ball guy, helps out on the defensive glass a lot. He's elite in transition, which is huge in the NBA. If you don't have to set up in the half-court offense and you get easy buckets in transition, that just adds to your value significantly. And then we take a look at the shooting, 39% from 3, 81 from the free throw line. He showed okay ability, a little bit to handle the ball and be a little bit of a facilitator, though that's never really going to be his role. As I said, he's more of that connecting piece. And 39% from 3 on nearly 9 attempts per 100 possessions. All that you could ask for. Gets downhill, nearly 7 rim attempts per game, 65% at the rims, pretty darn good. You trust in that and you believe in that. And as I said, he just really seems to be a guy that would fit in anywhere. Now, this may be one that comes to a surprise to a lot of you. And my number 10 player in the class is Dailyn Swain. And a lot of this has to do with just his ability to be a pure, kind of point forward role. I just think that he has so much potential as, a primary ball handler at 6'7" barefoot. So you're thinking 6'8", maybe pushing 6'9" in shoes, 6'10" wingspan, good reach, pretty good weight, which is why I think that you see him go a little bit more up to that shooting guard small forward role, even if he doesn't quite have the ball in his hands as a point guard. But if you drop him down to power forward, he's a little light, little short, but the offensive, weaponry, he can get downhill as he pleases, super good handle, good facilitator for his size, doesn't really turn the ball over. Maybe you wish to see a little bit more rebounding. He is a great on-ball defender and in passing lanes. He's an above-average defender, a common theme you'll see here. And also, I know that the three-point shot is not amazing right now. He shot 35%, which on the surface, it's not bad. But his three-point attempt rate was really low, so it's a smaller sample size. But the form, it's not, the Darren Petersons or the Mikel Brown Juniors of the world, but it'll work in the NBA. I think that he'll hit enough shots. And so 35% from 3 will be more than enough. And that he will, be a really fun, I think he's a modern fit in the positionless NBA. I just, when I watch his tape, when I watched him play at Texas this year, I just found myself, really enjoying every part of his game. He's just fun to watch, and he just controls the game. He wills the game to his pace, and that's what I really like. Sometimes you just wish he was almost a little bit more aggressive. As we get back, to my board, we talked about, Dailyn Swain. I'll go a little bit quicker here. Number 11 for me is JQ. I know that he really didn't play this year for Kentucky. A lot of that to do with injuries. Some people felt like, he was kind of sandbagging it, maybe didn't really want to risk further injuries before going to the draft, especially since a lot of people think he would have been a first-round pick last year had he been age eligible to go into the draft after his rookie year at Arizona State. But just about as dominant of an interior force as you're going to see, for a kid who's 19. Excuse me, he may even still be 18, but rebounds at an elite rate, elite rim protector, so mobile because he's, only 6'9" or 6'10", but has the massive wingspan that he can get away with it. And the offensive game is still developing, still expanding, but you can't put a premium on, if he's healthy, of course, being an elite rebounder, elite defender with plenty of offensive upside and is such a moldable ball of clay with his age and already his experience playing at a high level. Number 12, Kingston Flemings. This is a guy at Houston. I think that, he dealt with poor spacing. I think that if you see him, surrounded by better teammates, better floor spacing, his three-point percentage will go up. He already showed great patience as an offensive initiator, as a passer, some scoring upside, and also he's a very willing defender. You don't go to Houston and play under Kelvin Sampson unless you're very willing as a defender. You're willing to put in that effort, put in that work. And so I know that he's a little bit on the smaller end. Great wingspan. I believe it's 6'7"-ish, or excuse me, not 6'7". I'm thinking of a different guard. But he does have a 6'4" wingspan. You take a look at his frame, you're like, okay, 6'4", wingspan, 6'3" height. Weight's not amazing, but the vertical, 40.5 inches. Then you take a look at the defensive metrics, 98th percentile in adjusted impact. And that is just because 3% steal percentage. Great positional, rim protector at nearly 1.5 block percentage. Rebounds, gets down low, shoots the free throws at an elite clip. And so he's just a guy where, I just think that he's going to be a contributor no matter where he goes, that he is going to be able to affect the game in so many different ways, even if he's not, the biggest guard or your go-to scorer on the floor. He's conducive to winning. And that's similar with Morez Johnson Jr., a guy who, maybe could have been, on Illinois still, and who knows what it looks with Keaton Wagler there and Morez Johnson Jr. But instead, Morez Johnson Jr. had to share a front court with Ade Mara and Yaxel Lendeborg, and yet he was a star in his role. He was a guy that did all the dirty work. He did whatever was asked of him, and I can really value his ability as a connecting piece, as an energy player in the 80th percentile or better on both adjusted offensive and defensive impact. He is not really much of a floor spacer at this time. He shot 34% from three, but the three-point rate was really low. So not a large sample size, pretty good free throw shooter, really efficient player all around. As I talked about, elite defender, nearly a 5% block rate, pretty good steal rate. Another guy where the rebounding probably looks better if he isn't surrounded by Yaxel and Ade Mara, similar to what I talked about with them. And he's also, I did say that his rebounding may be better on the defensive end. He was an elite offensive rebounder, and I think that's important to pay attention to. He shot 73% at the rim. That's a great number. So he's a guy where I think he just slots in really on any single team and is able to make a consistent impact. We take a look, beyond him, Darius Acuff, elite offensive player, as bad as elite as it gets. Elite efficiency too, which, I think a lot of people forget when you talk about Darius Acuff. Such a high offensive load, and yet he was able to maintain great efficiency and still be, a premier passer as well, along with being, one of the best scorers, not just as a freshman, but in the entire nation. And my issue with him largely hinges on the defensive end. He is about as bad of a defender as you're going to see in this draft class, and he's smaller. So you could say, well, some of that has to do with being 6'2". He has a 6'7" wingspan, which should help him. Pretty good vertical. I think a lot of it for him is the willingness to defend. Being willing to put a little bit more effort in on that side of the floor. Care a little bit more about winning, being more of a leader on that end, rather than just I'm going to get mine as a scorer and as a facilitator on the offensive end. There's two sides of the ball in basketball. And he only really plays one of them, and he plays one of them about as good as anyone else in the entire country last year. But it's like, where do you draw the line between, can a guy be, so much of a defensive liability that his offensive capabilities don't really matter as much? And that's kind of where I struggle with Darius Acuff. I think that, if he puts an effort on the defensive end, he has a 6'7" wingspan, so that tells you that he should, be able to be at least a passable defender if a guy like, Kingston Flemings, who is around the same height and has, a 4-inch shorter wingspan, can be an above average and a great defender. Why can't Darius Acuff be it? And I think that a lot of that has to do with attitude. So I feel like if he has the right attitude, if he really cares about being a leader, being conducive to winning, and we see him put in that effort on the defensive end, then he can be an elite, one of the elite guards in the NBA. But because of that, I just don't see the value in trusting that all that's going to change and all that's going to develop, even with the offensive firepower. The last player in this tier for me, my number 15 ranked player, Ibuka Okori. He's a guy, basically was Stanford's whole team, averaged 23 points per game, great efficiency, another guy who's a smaller guard. And why I like him is that he was forced into so many different, situations, being Stanford's guy, being, trapped, different defenses being thrown at him, being forced, maybe to have to facilitate more. And I think that that's going to help him translate a ton. And beyond that, for a guy who's small, he finishes at the rim at an elite rate. He gets to the rim really well. As I said, when the three-point shot is falling, there's really nothing you can do to stop him. We saw him score 40 points against Georgia Tech. We saw him score 36 points against North Carolina, where he just looked unstoppable. And so, again, another smaller guard, but if he has enough redeeming qualities, and if you put in the effort on the defensive end, can be well above average. We get into my next tier, definable role tier. Alan Graves, Spreadsheet FC's favorite player. All the advanced metrics tell you he almost does every single thing well. My issue is, he played at Santa Clara, and we saw guys like Jalen Williams, played at Santa Clara, came to the NBA, all-star, all-defensive team. Who's to say Alan Graves can't do that? I don't know. The advanced metrics are amazing. When I watch him, great player. I don't know if they quite live up to that standard. I just worry about him finding his exact role, and he relies on his wingspan a lot on defense, more so than physically moving his body, and that's why he has good steal and block rates, but why, his team's net or defensive rating wasn't always amazing when he was on the floor. Moving on, Hans Steinbeck, another guy who is an elite offensive player, and I think that my biggest concern with him is, obviously, like a lot of these guys I've talked about, the defensive end. He's one of the best rebounders in the country in this entire draft. Great offensive player, has shown promise as a stretch big. The major issue, not a great defender, and about at 6'10", not a very long wingspan. I worry about what's his fit in the NBA. Is he a 6'10" power forward that can shoot the three, even though that's not his best attribute? Because he's not going to be able to dominate, on the boards and in the post quite as much as he was at Washington. And he's a little bit positionally small to deal with a lot of the bigs in the NBA. So what happens? Do you slide him to the 4? Then does he get a little bit abused on the defensive end by these more athletic 4s? I think that's possible, and so that's why I dropped him a little bit, even though he oozes offensive talent. 18, Bennett Sturts, I think just steady offensive force, offensive engine. He's a guy where if he's on my team, I'm going to feel comfortable with him bringing the ball up the floor every single game. He's a willing defender, really good on-ball defender in passing lanes, elite facilitator, can shoot the three, create his own shot, continues to climb the levels of college basketball over the last few years and has continued his efficiency and continued his elite play. Isaiah Evans at Duke, he was a guy who was asked to do more this year, after Con Knipple left and Cooper Flagg left. Yes, he had Cam Boozer there, but elite of the elite shooter, great defender. He showed a lot more promise and development in terms of getting to the rim this year than he had in the past, and I think that's huge to focus on. And he, in doing so, his free throw rate went up, his rim percentage went up a good chunk too, his efficiency at the rim, and so he's just a guy, plug and play, could be a 3-and-D 2 or 3 in almost any single lineup and be effective in that role. I really don't see a world where he busters, just out of a team's rotation. Similar thing with Cameron Carr. He's a dynamic athlete. The three-point shot is great, and he was someone who, got better at creating a shot as the season went on. The defense, he has all the frame and athleticism that tells you that he should be a great defender, but it wasn't always that at times. And so, you hope that he puts in that effort and maybe, being more of a role player than, one of your one or two go-to guys in the NBA that the defense will pick up. But similar to Isaiah Evans, when the three-point shot's falling and if he's locked in on defense, the shot creation, the ability to get downhill, his athleticism, he's just a total package, and he would fit in any team's rotation. Zuby Ejiofor at 21 for me as we continue this definable role tier. I think that Zuby Ejiofor is just an elite defender. And I think that if you're an elite defender and you're at least passable on offense, there's going to be a role for you on a team somewhere in a rotation. And with Zuby Ejiofor being such an elite defender, both on ball as a rim protector, great rebounder. He can shoot the mid-range well, can finish at the rim. He's not the biggest guy. He's not going to get post-ups in the NBA, more than likely. But I could see him being a little bit of a poor man Colin Murray-Boyles. Maybe can't handle the ball quite as well as him, but, elite defensive player. What you get on defense, you may give up on the offensive end a little bit. And so I trust that ability to, be playable, passable. He shot the three-point shot better than at any point in his career where he got up to 30%. You hope maybe that develops a little bit more. And so that's why I have him, a little bit higher probably than the consensus. We look at Joshua Jefferson, another jack-of-all-trades guy, does everything well. Elite defender, 6'7". So you may want him at the 3 or the 4 rather than, at times the 4 or the 5 where we saw him at Iowa State. Not the best three-point shooter, but again, another guy. We have a couple of them in this class where you look at Alan Graves, you look at Braden Burries, you look at Yaxel Lendeborg, Cam Boozer, where they do pretty much everything well, and they have enough, there's a saying, jack of all trades, master of none, and sometimes that concerns people because they're like, if they don't have that standout skill, how do they stand out or how do they differ themselves from anyone else in the league? Now for him, he, I think, has enough of an offensive arsenal similar to Zuby Ejiofor that he can make up for, not being the best offensive player, but the defense is there. That's going to get him in the rotation. We continue on, 23, Malik Thomas. He is an elite combo guard in terms of, I think that he's a guy, you just give him the ball and he can create shots for himself. He showed promise a little bit as a passer. Obviously, he played off of Darius Acuff, and that's not the hardest thing to do with how good of a player Darius Acuff is. But he's one of these guys that I almost see being better in the NBA than he was in college, and he was very good in college. He's a guy where a lot of people are like, hey, if he goes back to school, maybe he becomes a top 10 or top 5 pick. Well, he kept his name in the draft as a freshman. A lot of people believe that's because he got very good feedback from NBA teams saying, hey, we would love to have you be a secondary shot creator, run our second unit, be that guy. And he showed efficiency across the board. He's a willing defender, decent frame, 6'3"-ish, good wingspan. And so he's a guy that, he's going to find himself in a rotation as a secondary creator, secondary initiator. Maybe not ever the star or the absolute go-to guy, but one of these offensive weapons that a team needs, to keep up in this fast-paced style of the NBA. We continue on, LeBaron Philon, another elite offensive guard. He's about as efficient as it gets when you come to offensive weapons, offensive engines. Elite shot creator as well, developed as a passer. Another guy similar to Darius Acuff and Abuka Okori, where you're like, the defense isn't great. It's not great, but he's such a dynamic offensive weapon that he can make up for it. And, you maybe just don't build your team completely around him, but he is a darn good player to have on your team as a scorer and a facilitator. Elite, as I said, really upped his three-point shooting, gets to the rim at a great rate, good use of footwork. He's a guy that I trust having a very high floor. The ceiling may be a little bit capped because he's not the best athlete and because of his, slighter frame, but I'll be interested to see, how he translates to the league. This next guy, I don't know what to say about him, Nate Ament. He's basically, he is the jack of all trades, master of none, but I would say he's below average at almost everything. Outside of getting to the free throw line, he's elite at drawing fouls, getting to the rim, and not finishing. He doesn't finish at the rim. His three-point percentage left a lot to be desired in the low 30%. Mid-range percentage, he shot a lot of them, was very streaky, but at 6'10", large wingspan, very athletic, can handle the ball, very mobile at his size, he provides a lot of upside if everything goes right. If everything goes right, this is someone who has no holes in his game. He's a guy who can do everything well, can be the ultimate offensive weapon, also provides versatility, as a ball handler, off ball, can defend, rebound, do everything you need. It's just a matter of if he puts it all together, which is why I put him in his own tier and why I'm a little bit lower on him, just because he has so many different things that need to improve that I don't think it's like a quick, simple switch that he has to flip on. Finishing out with the last 5 guys on my big board, these are rotation with starter qualities. Chris Knack Jr., a 7'5" wingspan, really athletic, has shown promise as a mid-range jumper, has shown a little bit of the ability to step outside and shoot threes. For his frame and his wingspan and his athleticism, the defensive stats necessarily didn't show up quite as well as you want them to, but I think that they will translate. Great rebounder, as I said. The offensive game can develop. I think he's, one of those mobile, rim-protecting, little stretch bigs if everything goes right. Koa Pete, another guy where elite by the rim and pretty good in the mid-range area. Great in transition, good defender, good rebounder, but he's a little bit positionally small to be playing back to the basket and having post-ups like he did a good amount at Arizona. And so that's something that I worry about. Is he didn't really shoot the 3 a whole lot. The percentage wasn't bad, but he didn't shoot it a whole lot. Can't really create his own shot super well. And so I worry about the translation to the NBA being positionally small and not having that go-to, because his go-to in college, he was really elite backing down players of similar stature, maybe even a little bit taller, but it's not going to work in the NBA where guys are a lot stronger and a lot more physically gifted. 28, Christian Anderson might be the most talented shooter in this draft. Just knockdown, I think that's the best way to put it. Shot threes a ton and hit them a ton, over 40% clip, and also is a great passer. Really ran Texas Tech's offense. A lot more of the load went on him when JT Toppin went down, and he just continued to flourish. He is 6 feet tall, which is rough in the NBA, but he was a pretty decent defender, not the best. Again, a lot of these small guards, you don't expect them to be an elite defender, but you want to see that they try. He showed me that he's tried, and his ability to shoot, is bar none. So you could play him almost with anyone if you just rely on him to be a shooter and you maybe hide him a little bit on defense. And he can also run your offense. I really see him as one of the elite, bench floor generals, a guy that you put into the game, provide a spark, can score, can pass, but he's never going to be your focal point of your team. These last 2 guys in my top 30, it's going to be Sergio De Lara, 6'6" guard, has played in Spain for Valencia, has played in the EuroLeague a little bit. As we know, EuroLeague numbers don't always pop off the page, and he's shown the ability to knock down threes, to get to the rim, draw fouls. The positional, height is intriguing enough, but he's shown promise as a floor general, rebounder, and I won't lie, I haven't watched a whole lot of him, especially I think he's probably the guy I watched the least out of my top 30, but I believe that the physical tools are there. From what I've seen on the metrics, I think that if molded right, you got another jumbo guard that can just be a great player for your team. Maybe never an all-star or, again, a true great starter, but a guy who can just initiate and be that facilitator, run your offense in pinch minutes off the bench. And then finally, Trevon Brazile. I'm super high on Trevon Brazile, higher than most. You take a look at the physical profile. He is 6'9" with a 7'4" wingspan, can jump out of the gym, 42-inch vertical, super athletic, just fast. Everything about him physically is elite. The issue becomes when you actually, watch him play, and he's anything but polished on the offensive end. He's another guy where he has every single tool on offense you would need. He has shown potential as, being able to pass a little bit at his size, to get downhill. He's great at finishing at the rim, largely due to his length and athleticism. The three-point shot, 34%, that's playable, but not a ton of, not a ton of attempts. The form is pretty good, so that's why I think that could develop. But on the defensive end is where he makes his money. He is an elite rim protector, just, a very good defensive glue guy because of his sheer size and athleticism. And I think that size and athleticism is going to get him into lineups, pretty early on in his career. I know he's an older prospect and he's dealt with injuries, but he's one of those guys where if everything goes right, you're like, how in the world does he probably, I think he's going to go in round 2, get to round 2? Or even if he ends up in late round 1, how did he fall that far? This guy was can't miss. He did everything well. And so that is my top 30 players in this draft class, the 2026 draft class that's going to be taking place tomorrow. I'm really excited to see what happens. And I think that there's a lot of talent, a lot of places where teams can make improvements to their rosters, increase their chances of, competing for an NBA title in this era of parity where we've had 8 straight different NBA champions. And with that, I just want to thank you all for watching. And I'll give you, one more little scroll down my board just to show you guys. As we take a look here. So Darren Peterson 1, Caleb Boozer 2, Darren Peterson 1, Cameron Boozer 2, Caleb Wilson 3, and AJ Dybansta. That's my franchise cornerstones. And you have Yaxel Lendeborg, Keaton Wagler, Adayamara, Mikel Brown, Braden Burries, Dailyn Swain, JQ, Kingston Flemings, Merez Johnson Jr., Darius Acuff, Abuka Okori. Those are my immediate impact and upside guys. Then, we get to our definable role tier: Alan Graves, Hans Steinbeck, Bennett Sturts, Isaiah Evans, Cam Carr, Zuby Ejiofor, Joshua Jefferson, Malik Thomas, LeBaron Philon. Then we get to the Nate Ament tier. He's a guy where it could easily be a steal down the line, but again, he has to put everything together, and I don't necessarily believe that could happen. I think he is arguably going to go potentially top 10 if the Bucks trade Giannis. I think the Bucks may take him at 10. And then lastly, my rotation was starter qualities: Kristen Eck Jr., Koa Pete, Christian Anderson, Sergio Dallara, and Trevon Brazile. And then my last 5 throw-ins, I'll just show you guys at the end, are Henry Visar, Terrace Reed Jr., Richie Saunders, Karim Lopez, and Alex Caravan. Thank you so much for watching.